One of the most important steps in a project is deployment. This is the moment when our project becomes something real and accessible to everyone. If you haven't deployed your Content Island project on a server yet, I recommend starting with automatic deployment, using Astro and Content Island with GitHub Actions. Once your project is deployed, you may want to automate the deployment process. Every time you make a change to your Content Island project, that is, whenever you add a new post, modify some data, or even decide that something should no longer be visible, you want your server to perform a new deployment without having to do it manually. To achieve this, we will use webhooks from Content Island and GitHub. What is a webhook? A webhook is a way to notify another application that something has happened in ours. In other words, when an event occurs in our application, a request is sent to a URL that we have previously defined. GitHub allows you to define two types of webhooks. Repository webhooks, which allow external services to be notified when changes occur in a repository, for example, when a push is made or a pull is created. Request and workflow webhooks, which allow triggering a GitHub action workflow when an external service sends a request to a URL. In our case, we are going to use the second one. We will trigger a GitHub action workflow to deploy our project on GitHub pages every time a change is made to our content project. We will start with the project that we already have deployed on GitHub pages. And we will use the event repository dispatch from GitHub Actions to trigger the deploy YAML workflow, which we have already defined and is responsible for deploying our project on GitHub pages. To do this, we update the deploy YAML file. We add the event repository dispatch in the on section. And define a name for the event type, for example, deploy from Content Island. This name allows us to identify the triggered event, meaning we can define multiple events that perform different actions, each with its own name. In this case, we are deploying to GitHub. But the workflow could be deploying to any other provider such as Azure, AWS, etc. We make a commit and push these changes. Now we have the repository ready with this new event. And to trigger this event, GitHub has a dispatch event endpoint to send post requests to a specific event. We only need an access token to verify that we have permission to trigger it, the owner and name of the repository, and finally the type of event we want to trigger. We are going to create an access token to be able to trigger the event. Deploy from Content Island. As we see in the official documentation, it needs to have the required permission. Write access to contents. So we go to our GitHub account. In the settings section of our profile, since tokens cannot be created at the repository level, in the left menu, we simply select Developer Settings, then Personal Access Tokens, and we select Fine-Grained Tokens. We generate a new one, give it a name, for example, Deploy. Content Island to the GHP the destination. We change the repository owner if necessary in this case. Content Island. We select the expiration date we want. GitHub will automatically send us an email to remind us that the token is about to expire so we can generate a new one. We grant access only to the repository we want to deploy. And finally, within the repository permissions section, we select contents. With write access, then generate the token. And copy it. This is the only time we will see it, so make sure to store it in a safe place. Now we need to create a webhook in our Content Island project. Once logged into our account and after selecting our project, we go to the Webhook tab. We click on Create Webhook. We enter the name of the organization or repository owner, in this case, Content Island. The name of the repository. We paste the access token we just created in GitHub. And finally, the name of the event we defined in the workflow, in this case, deploy from Content Island. We save the changes. And now we can make any changes to our content. For example, let's make a post no longer visible. We go to the Content tab, select the post we want to modify, and click the Unpublish button. This changes the content status to draft, meaning it will no longer be public. Additionally, if we go to our GitHub repository, in the Actions panel, we will see that a new workflow has been triggered with the name Deploy from Content Island. And if we open the deployed application, we will see that now we only have 4 posts available. If we republish the post, we will see that the workflow is triggered again. And now it is available in the application again. And that's it. Now we have everything set up to focus on what really matters, our content, without having to worry about deploying the application.